Hey, folks, welcome to this week's episode of Hunting Matters. I'm laughing because we've had to restart this week's episode. We've got big storms coming into the area. So I apologize to our guest, Kelli Poole, today. I do want to remind you that this podcast is brought to you by Houston Safari Club Foundation. You can find out about us at wehuntwegive.org. We'd love you to join and be a member. And also, I don't want to fail to mention that Global Rescue has their own space on our brand new website at wehuntwegive.org. You can go in and click on the drop down and click on the Global Rescue page. Global Rescue has been a longtime supporter of Houston Safari Club Foundation, and we appreciate that. So Kelli Poole is our guest today. She works with Global Rescue. She is the hunting account manager, and she is also a wildlife professional, international hunting advocate with a degree in wildlife management. She's based out of Wyoming, and she supports Global Rescue. Supports. We're going to talk about this a little bit more, but Global Rescue supports global hunting operations and emergency services. And Kelli's also a former national board member of the Mule Deer Foundation, and has traveled over two dozen countries, which I want to talk about, including leading conservation and women's guide training initiatives in Tajikistan. And she's also an avid wildlife photographer, artist, and competes in IGP Schutzhund with her dog. Kelli, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about all the things we're going to talk about.
Joining us again. So my sincere apologies for that. Let's backtrack a little bit. What started your interest in wildlife management, and how did that path lead you to a career in international hunting advocacy?
Yeah, really good question. So, as we were previously discussing, I found my love for wildlife management. I was actually a big painter, and I'm a wildlife photographer. And I had taken a trip to Africa in 2014, traveling with some good friends of mine. And there was this one moment where we did a lot of camping. We were in a park in Zambia, and the sun was setting, and this elephant's crossing the river. And, my friend looks at me and says, Kelli, you're really interested in, taking pictures and painting wildlife. However, I think what you're really interested in is the subject matter, is wildlife. I used to go to the library and check out books, and I would get those big encyclopedias, about elk or, mountain ungulates or different animals. And I would read the whole book, not just look for images to sort of be inspired to paint. So that's what really sparked my interest in wildlife management and in wildlife as a subject matter. So I quickly enrolled at Colorado Mountain College in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. I was working full time, but I went down to the local DNR office in Colorado and said, I'm interested in this job. I have this picture painted of what I believe it to be. However, I want to really make sure I'm on the right path. And I would love to start volunteering just to see if my ideas of this job are actually going to be what the job is. So I started volunteering with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And I must have been on the right path because one of the technicians there was actually getting ready to leave. And the biologist there said, you've been showing up every day. You're doing a good job. I know you're in pursuit of your degree. Would you like this job? And so I became a technician with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, which allowed me to get a lot of experience during my, college career. I ended up graduating with a degree in wildlife management from Montana State University in Bozeman. Went on to work with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, and then also Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
That's awesome. And you obviously have firsthand experience with what it means to be boots on the ground. Can you speak to a little bit about, I want to use this opportunity to encourage people to get involved in these types of projects that are happening all the time. There's always a call and a need for volunteers for everything from, counting sheep on the side of a mountain to removing old fences and that sort of thing. Talk a little bit about the importance of volunteers to these efforts.
Yeah, I think a lot of information comes from, people who are on the ground, whether you're working for a state agency or you're just an avid hunter, you like to hike, you're out fishing with your family. And so they love to get that information from people who have a lot of boots on the ground. And then they also do a really good job organizing, certain projects that are going on in the area. So it might be a guzzler for sheep, or for mule deer. Like you said, might be old fence removal. There's been a lot of good data on, wildlife appropriate or wildlife supporting fencing. So there's, opportunity to do that. There's opportunity for habitat work, and then there's also opportunity to do some really fun surveys. So we used to organize, large parties of volunteers and say, you go to this part on the mountain, I'm going to be at this part of the mountain. Let's see what kind of animals we see, specific to sheep or mountain goat. And then just to collect that data. And a lot of information comes from hunters. As a technician, where you start in wildlife management, it's the most fun job, but it's the least paying job. And you get to spend a lot of time in the field, but then you can imagine, state area biologists, there's a lot of time you have to spend in the office. And so the time in the field is limited due to, new wildlife management area plans, dealing with, boards and having public meetings. And there's a lot of sort of admin work. So to get that information from the public is incredible. And they do a really good job sort of reaching out, asking for volunteers. And it's just a great way to, one, get to know your state wildlife biologist. And then also just to build those relationships, because, we all want conservation. We all want to, be on the same page. We all want to be doing our best to preserve habitat and have better hunting opportunities. And so it's a really good way to get involved with your state agency. I think, going to those public meetings, people often forget that, wildlife, because of what we've set up in the past, is a public resource. So our biologists are acting on behalf of, us as a consumer for our wildlife, and we have to go state our opinions. They hold public meetings when there's big law changes. If they want to, manage the, buck to doe ratio or bull to cow ratio, we have a say in that, but we have to make sure that we show up to those meetings and give our input. So volunteering, going to some of these programs that they set up, allows us to build those relationships as well. That's super impactful for our wildlife.
That's a very good point and call to action, to make sure that no matter what state you live in, they have a lot of these meetings that are open to the public, and they want to hear input and feedback from the public. So I like you said, I definitely encourage people to get on their Parks and Wildlife Department websites and our Fish and Game websites and find out when these meetings are, and stay informed and stay active. I have that same advice for people in regards to, hunting and outdoor related legislation as well, not just
Exactly.
parks and agencies. So it's a very important part. Hunting Matters is presented by Copandero Indoor Archery Pistol and Rifle Range, your premier indoor archery pistol and rifle shooting destination. Located in Oak Ridge North, right next to the Woodlands, Copandero offers two 25-yard pistol ranges, a 100-yard rifle range, and a 25-yard archery range. Whether you're honing your skills or just starting, Copandero has everything you need, including rentals, classes, a retail store, an in-house cafe, and a VIP lounge. Join Copandero today for an unmatched shooting experience. To learn more, go to copandero.com. So for those listeners and viewers who do not know, give us an overview of what is Global Rescue all about.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Global Rescue, it offers access to industry leading medical and security advisory and evacuation services to travels worldwide. So as you said, I manage our hunting accounts, but we work in all sort of verticals in international and national travel. So, if you climb Everest, if you, go fly fishing down on Christmas Island, if you do heli skiing, we have no activity restriction. So we're a great membership-based company that kind of has cornered the market in these sort of field rescue and medical repatriation services as you're traveling. It's a really good peace of mind to know, specifically hunting, since we're on a hunting podcast. You go to Africa, and I was actually just there last month, but you sort of look around and really realize how remote you are and how different things are. It's one thing to go to a different state or a different city, but the moment that you kind of take off from the U.S. and just everything is different, even your local emergency services numbers are no longer 911. It's just nice to have a membership to Global Rescue to know that you have peace of mind.
Yeah. It's I've talked to quite a few people who have been subscribers or been members of Global Rescue, and fortunately, very few of them have had to use your services. But I've talked to a couple of folks, people I know personally that have used your services, and they're like, man, I don't know where I would have been. And thank goodness I remember to get signed up and use it, because had I not, I don't know what I would have done. I mean, you guys, I want to talk about some experiences that you've encountered, but I mean, peace of mind is the first thing that comes to me when you're talking about global rescue and hairy situations. I mean, you guys specialize in that. The level of expertise you have with all your staff, they all have their own specialties, ranging from security and rescue and that sort of thing. It's really cool. As the hunting account manager, what does your day to day look like?
Yeah, so I support a lot of our partners. We have a lot of partners who are outfitters, a lot of partners who are, hunting booking agencies who work specifically with consumers who are, booking hunts to Central Asia, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia. I think it's fair to say that hunters, when there's a species that we're really trying to pursue, or say we're in pursuit of a slam, there's really nothing that's going to hold us back. I have friends that hunt in Iran because the Uriel is there, right? So it's just, we'd have a little less self-preservation, I think. And we're also used to being exposed to, but be it on the side of a mountain in the middle of Montana or going to Mongolia. So we know there's a risk, horseback hunt in BC. So to have this as a part of, I always describe it as like your gear packing list. So I've got my license, I've got my, 4457, I've got my, all the things that I need to pack in my bag. I should also think of my global rescue membership as part of my packing list as a hunter. So my day to day is talking to partners, making sure that they feel supported, helping with outreach. A lot of the times, I tell my partners, you're not required to be an expert in what global rescue is and what we do. So I'll help with their clients and answer questions and that sort of thing. Exactly.
Because I know you guys handle everything else. You've worked on a lot of conservation initiatives all over the globe. Is there one that stands out to you that's had either a personal, professional, that's been the most impactful for you?
Oh gosh. Um, I'm a member of many. So the one I'll talk to is probably the one I've spent the most time with, which is the Mule Deer Foundation. I was on the national board and I served 2 terms, so that's 6 years. I just rolled off at the February Expo just this past year. So I had some amazing opportunities just to meet some incredible industry folks. And one of my favorite interactions with the Mule Deer Foundation was we got invited to go to the White House with Trump's first term and sit in the room and listen to him talk about some environmental issues. And then I got to meet our lobbyist in DC. And what was really cool is he had a Sand Dunes National Park photo in his office. And I said, hey, when I worked for Colorado Parks and Wildlife in Colorado, I actually helped with some elk capture in the sand dunes. And he said, hey, I made that a park. I was like, what? That is so cool. So to see and meet the people that are actually working in DC that are lobbying for wildlife and, looking at all the different ins and outs that are going through, government funding and, egg funding and habitat work. It was just really, really cool to see. And just the people at Mule Deer Foundation were amazing. And, but I'm a part of many. So, I mean, each group is so important. Each group plays a huge role. And the reality is we need to have a large sum, right, to be impactful. It's not just one group that's going to be able to do everything. And I love that each group has sort of their own niche, right? So you look at DU with wetlands, you look at, RMEF with hunter access. There's these specific things that some groups focus maybe a little bit more on, but the reality is collectively as a whole, that's how we're unstoppable. So I think people should be a part of as many as they can. And I think each organization makes us stronger as a whole. I'm not personally an archery hunter, but I love archery hunting, right? Because that's my brother who's hunting.
Mhm.
And there's other components to hunting. Some people don't hunt Africa or have no interest, I'm going in November. you know, some people have interest in just hunting deer in their backyard. But those people are just as impactful, right? There's habitat, there's CWD, there's other issues facing our wildlife that are happening in our backyard or across the world.
Yeah, I think we take it for granted, unless we're involved. You and I both work with the legislative circles at the state and federal level and international level as well. Um, you make a very, very good point, and that I think that we take it for granted that there are so many dots that have to be connected to preserve habitat and wildlife, from the guy who's helping pull fence out of the ground and move it to the lobbyist in DC, like you just mentioned. It's just, I think we forget. What a heavy lift it is in conservation. But you make a very valid point that it takes all of us. I mean, everybody can contribute to this.
Exactly. Yep. And I think sometimes we get really hyper focused on one species. So, I'm the elk guy, I'm the sheep guy, I'm the deer guy. But the reality is, when you're impactful in some sort of habitat, you'd be silly to not think that you're not affecting everything, right? The songbirds, the soil, uh, health, the trees, the shrubs, the waterways, everything gets impacted. So reality is, while we have these sort of iconic species we like to stand behind, the work that you do to help preserve that species also has a trickle down effect. We're impacting everything. We're all a big habitat group, I think, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Capital Farm Credit understands that there's something about the outdoors that pulls you in. Could be the fresh air, the colors, the smells, the animals, the freedom. It's all just a part of who you are. And with our recreational land loans, you can purchase land for whatever outdoor pursuit you please. That way, the outdoors won't just be in your soul, it'll also be in your name. To learn more, visit capitalfarmcredit.com. Together, we're better.
So you've traveled to more than 2 dozen countries. How's that shaped your perspective on global wildlife conservation?
It's very different in a lot of parts of the world.
Mm.
And I think the biggest takeaway for me, especially going to places like Central Asia, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, places like Africa, it's really easy to walk in there and say, this is not what we do, and what you're doing is not right, because we're removed, right? We might be there physically, but we're not there on the day to day. We're not there when the snow leopard eats your yaks. We're not
Mm.
there when the elephant tramples your yearly supply of whatever you're planting, right? So it's really easy to step in there and say, oh, no, that's not what we do, and this is what works for us. So I try to go in and look at it, and generally am hunting. Sometimes, though, I do take, just specifically photography trips. And I just like to ask a bunch of questions. We manage a very specific way because of, the Pittman-Robertson Act, and, the way that we've been involved as hunters here in the US, but that is not the case in a lot of places. You have to look at things like, politically, how's the country, sort of operating. Tajikistan's only been a country since 92, I believe. So imagine, the sort of ins and outs of creating that government. I think a lot of these groups have done a good job, these NGOs going in and offering resources, and then us as hunters offering value, right? So we go in and say, hey, I would really love to hunt a markhor. This is important to me. For someone who doesn't have electricity, that's a weird concept. So I think as long as we can go in with sort of and hear their needs, and then say, hey, this is what has worked for us in the past. How can we mesh in, our trials, our successes and failures, and sort of offer you, not demand, not tell you this is the way it needs, but offer you some solutions to some management problems. So I think immediately of Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, the resources there are very limited.
Mm.
Thinking about, Markhor or Marco Polo population numbers is not top of mind when you don't have indoor plumbing.
Yeah.
It's just not, right? I mean, when you're trying to just live life, and we're in the Western world, we're so far removed from thinking about, just daily needs. We've far surpassed that. We fill our mind and with TikToks and whatever, right? We have the luxury of time on our side, and in a lot of places of the world they don't. So, I think about the resources you need to just collar Markhor or collar Bighorn or Marco Polo sheep or ibex to look at, where are they having their lambs? Where's their summer habitat? Where's their winter? Where are they traveling? Where are their corridors? They're just not top of mind things. And I know Wild Sheep is now doing a ton of work over there. So um, it just takes a special perspective to say, okay, what do you have? What's top of mind? What makes sense? Here are some offerings, instead of saying this is wrong. Whatever you're doing is wrong. And I think it should be this way. You have to approach it with that person, that culture, that life, of those people around that wildlife, like in serious consideration, I think. Because it's really easy to say, why would you do it this way? Or why are you shooting snow leopards? That's
Yeah.
easy question or judgment to have. And then you meet with the people and you talk about, what are the resources that we can offer in our experiences to say, all right, let's give this thing value. Let's work through what your needs, what your daily life is, and see if we can make something, make sense.
That's a great point, because you want to adapt to the culture and be part of it and have them engaged with it. But you can't, like you said, you can't just walk in and go, this is the way it's done, because you have no clue what these people are dealing with in some of these areas.
Hunting Matters is sponsored by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Under the visionary leadership of founder Johnny Morris, Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's is leading North America's largest conservation movement. Together with their partners in conservation, they're positively shaping the future of the outdoors through donations, grant making, and advocacy. The 501c3 Outdoor Fund raises funds to support conservation efforts by activating more than 200 million passionate sportsmen and women, rounding up their purchases in Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's stores and online. Visit BassPro.com or Cabela's.com today.
Leading conservation and women's guide training efforts in a country like Tajikistan. What's that all about, and what are the challenges there?
Yeah,
Are you dealing with women? Are you dealing with women that you're bringing there? Are you dealing with locals or
local women. That was such a cool, crazy thing that happened. So I was working with Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. We were deploying a bighorn sheep collar and then removing one. Went out with a grad student and a biologist, and then they said, "Hey, we're going to have two biologists here, and they're from Kyrgyzstan." And you think, okay, that's crazy. Yeah, let's do it. They wanted to see, the drugs that we were using, reversals, tools we were using, sort of get some hands-on, again, to look at, what would this project look like potentially with Marco Polo sheep or species that they have, because these resources don't exist in a lot of those places. So they came out, it just spurred this conversation with those two associates, and they said, hey, have you ever thought about doing this sort of work international? And I said, no. And they said, well, let's do it. And so I had a couple more meetings, and I worked with a company, which was then called H&CAT, Hunting and Conservation Alliance of Tajikistan. And they worked with locals to, again, bring that sort of awareness and sort of value to the wildlife. And then they wanted to really educate the locals on, what does a Marco Polo sheep mean to a traveling, hunter? What does it mean when someone comes from the US or from Canada or from Europe and they want to hunt one of these? And so I worked with the local women, who's generally had some in hunting. Their father was, a master guide there. And so they had an interest in hunting as well, kind of working with their fathers. And Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan are quite progressive. I didn't, at least in the parts that I didn't see a lot of, face coverings and that sort of thing. And the girls were a little bit older, late 20s, or not late 20s, early 20s. Most of them would have been married otherwise. And then we worked on things from, spotting wildlife, identifying wildlife. My Russian was not amazing. And we even went and purchased a goat, a local goat, and then skinned it as if you're doing a shoulder mount or a full body mount. Because, I mean, even with okay Russian, that's pretty technical to say, like, oh, this is where, cut around the nasal passage. I would never know how to say that in Russian. So I said, well, let's just get a knife in their hands and let's show them how to do that. Right. So, even the cuts of the animal, Americans like backstrap and tenderloin. And I cooked for some of the hunters. They love ribs, which we don't eat a ton of ribs of wildlife that we kill, but ibex ribs were actually really good. So, my work there was kind of a lot about receiving international clients. I worked specifically with more of the women, but then we would just sort of talk about, what are the expectations? How is it normally ran? And then again, like we talked about the management, how do we marry these sort of ideas to make sense here and in your culture?
So when are you writing a book?
Oh gosh, when I'm old.
I mean, you've had some great and unique experiences people never ever, get to experience. It's just amazing. Let's go back to global rescue a little bit and talk about emergency support. Can you walk us through a real world scenario where global rescue has stepped in to help a hunter that's or a traveler that's in distress? Something that stands out in your mind?
Yeah, I knew that you were going to ask me that, so I actually pulled some up so I could
Because I know you
tell
guys
you
dealt with a
exactly
lot.
how it goes. So if some of your listeners have been to some of our shows, we usually have a television screen on loop with more hunting specific stories. But I would say probably one of our most popular that a lot of people know of Global Rescue is we had a Cape buffalo attack. A member of ours, Angie, she experienced firsthand. She was walking through a river valley in Zimbabwe. And then for anyone who's been to Africa or hunted Cape buffalo, you can see them in the open, but if they're ever injured or it's a really hot day, they can get into that brush pretty quickly. So there was a scenario where she was with her husband. There was a Cape buffalo in some grass very close nearby that she did not see. It charged for both her and her husband. It got Angie. Unfortunately, she suffered a dislocated spine,
Mm.
collapsed lungs, extensive internal injuries, and they contacted Global Rescue. And we went in there. We do field rescue, so we get you from the point of illness and injury. We got her to a facility in Johannesburg that saved her life. And she still calls and we still talk to her at Global Rescue. She cannot walk. She suffered an attack so severe that it did sever her spine and she is unable to walk, but she is alive. So,
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. I'm guessing that happens frequently, that you have people that you basically have saved their life that want to remain close to you guys, that, that are like, hey, listen, I don't know. There seems to be some possibility of some kind of bond forming there.
for sure. Yep, for sure. I mean, we know that when people call, it's generally either a really bad day, because we do offer those advisory services. So you have a stomach ache, you think maybe you need to see a doctor, or it's potentially the worst day of your life. So when people call in, I mean, it's always very, very serious because, it's, there's a lot of adrenaline. People are afraid, and so it's our job to transfer those calls right to our operations and see what we can do to get them out of there.
And the staff and the team there are on call 24/7, 365.
You got it. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. That's crazy. What are some common misconceptions people have about travel safety in remote hunting destinations?
Yeah, I think people think, if I can get in here, I can get out quickly. That's not always the case. So we always try to set really clear expectations that, while you're traveling very remote, sometimes it does take time to get vehicles in, because we do have a lot of scenarios where people walk in someplace, right? And maybe it's not possible to get anything else in. So we have to deploy our closest resource. We've got vetted, facilities all over the world and clinics and that sort of thing. But yeah, the more remote you get, it still is challenging. Everyone wants to think that a helicopter can land everywhere, and that's not the case. So
Yeah, especially if it's
I
weather.
think, yeah, I think also being prepared for triage, right? So if you nick a serious artery, you're going to have to do some on the ground, prepping of yourself. We can't you can't blink your eye and we'll be there. So it's always good to have your backcountry first aid certifications, to travel with your tourniquets, to travel with your safety pack, right? And then to know how to act in those scenarios, because you're going to have to do something to stabilize if you're very remote. And often people they panic, but if you have at least a base understanding on how to stabilize yourself or stabilize someone, that could really be the difference between life and death.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Hunting Matters is presented by DEA Ranch. Are you looking for the ultimate South Texas hunting experience? Then look no further than DEA Ranch. DEA Ranch offers some of the best whitetail and exotic game hunts in South Texas year-round. Whether you're looking to fill your freezer or put that next hunting memory on the wall, their professional guides are focused on ensuring each client has a memorable and exciting hunting experience. DEA Ranch offers guided hunts, professional staff, chef-prepared meals, trophy preparation, and more. To learn more, go to dearanch.com. That's dearanch.com.
So I'm going, let's say I'm going to use myself as an example. So I'm going to a foreign country to hunt or travel for whatever experience. And I'm a global rescue client. Whether that's dangerous physical conditions, terrain, or political instability. How do you guys, if I were to call you, how would you say, okay, let's say I'm going to X country and there's some, occasional political instability, but it's more of a terrain issue, whatever. How can I ask Global Rescue, or what do I ask Global Rescue, and how do you guys advise your clients on how to prepare for those? Not just if something happens, but preparing for the environment or the climate that you're going into. What kind of advisement do you guys give in that regard?
Yeah, we have a really cool resource. It's called our Global Rescue Grid System. And our ops team goes in and updates every 12 to 14 days. You get current events. So if there is a protest or some civil unrest going on, it has active leading events on the first page of this report. They're generally between 40 and 50 pages long, and it goes through everything of kind of your general overview of the country, what sort of physical safety you should be aware of. So whether that's, terrorism, protests, government happenings. And then it goes into immunizations. So what's required to get into the country, what's advised in the country, all your important contact information. So your emergency numbers, where your embassies are located, even everything down to what are the major holidays of the country. So a lot of people, maybe they need to go get cash to pay an outfitter or pay a PH, and the banks aren't open, right? Or they lost their wallet. So it has your locations for things like that, and it's this really nice, very robust report that we prepare. I like to download them and just keep them on my phone. So if I need emergency numbers, I need to know, where my closest embassy is. We have advisory services with those memberships as well. So, for example, you do lose your passport, you can get in touch with us and we can help with, figuring out where that closest embassy is. So we do our best to kind of prepare for you for your travels with these grid reports on, kind of current events, and then also just sort of some pre-trip prep is, kind of how we market it. Go through this, know what's going on in the country. We also use the state website to look at advisory, with the U.S. government. So that what kind of travel advisory we encourage people, the STEP program is great to enroll in, especially when you're going to some of these countries, so that the U.S. government knows you're traveling there as well. So,
What's the STEP program?
it's through the government. And you can enroll in that and give them the dates that you're going to be traveling. So I did it when I just went to South Africa. It just basically puts your name on a date or on a list. So if there's a government issued evacuation, your name is also on this list with the U.S. government.
That's very smart. It's like calling the constable to say, "Hey, I'm going to be out of town on vacation for a week. Can you do an extra drive
Exactly.
by at the house?"
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to imagine an emergency on a hunting trip. But when the unexpected happens, you want the team of medical and security experts at Global Rescue to be there for you. Global Rescue Operations Centers are staffed by experienced personnel, and you'll always speak to an expert on the first call. Global Rescue provides unparalleled capabilities to transport members to the hospital of their choice, not just the closest. So trade what-ifs for peace of mind with convenient travel services designed for the unexpected. Learn more at globalrescue.com/hunting matters.
Yep.
You know, as a woman in the hunting space, but and you obviously have your boundaries have been greatly expanded versus most people, most men I know. But as a woman that has been active in the domestic and international hunting space, what are some of the challenges that you've encountered, and what are some of the breakthroughs you're seeing for women in hunting and the outdoors in general?
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of these really cool classes sort of, popping up. There's, women specific new hunters or just women specific hunting, groups, right? So like ladies can sign up to go bear hunting, with some professionals, some guides, some women guides. It can be quite intimidating, I think, as a woman to step into, what's been deemed more a masculine sort of activity. But women they want to get after it too, and they like to hike and hunt um, and so I think there's a lot of resources like that are sort of popping up, like just geared specifically towards women, that a lot of women like to do. And then as far as it goes for me, I might be just a little like exception to the rule because I generally am always the only woman in hunt camp for some reason. I'm always like, there's always two questions I ask when I show up. How many women have hunted here before me? And yeah, like, am I the kind of first woman to be here? I'm very roll with it though. I went to Mexico in February to hunt an aoudad. I was the third woman ever to hunt there. And I somehow end up in these crazy hunting scenarios. I think, my background in traveling, I've been to so many countries because I used to live in Germany, and I would just hop on a plane and go to Iceland for the weekend or go check out a fjord in Norway. I've always had this just deep desire to explore, and sort of test myself too. Say, can I get from A to B on my own? Can I figure it out if I have an issue? And sort of just trusting my intuition. But I think, for women who are just maybe getting their feet wet, just dipping a toe in the water, there are some amazing programs that are out there, even through state agencies. So again, talking about, getting to know your local state agency, they have, new women hunters, and they'll arrange with a local outfitter to go shoot a cow elk, or there's some industry women who do amazing, bear hunts or that sort of thing too. So there's a lot of resources for women for sure, depending on, what kind of hunt they're ready for, what kind of experience they're looking for.
I'm always encouraged to hear that because I've witnessed a change over the years of women that are getting to the outdoors, and the old adage that if mama goes, everybody goes. I see it all the time. And it's really encouraging to see that our own membership has changed dramatically within the Houston Safari Club Foundation. We are actually 14% women. It was 11%. Yeah, it was 11% of our membership were women just a couple of years ago. And, that's been phenomenal. I mean, I was raised by a strong woman who taught me how to hunt and fish. She would sit at the end of this red dirt road in Louisiana where I grew up and let me shoot a BB gun in the water for hours. That was just, she knew I wanted to do it and she made sure it happened, or she'd be waiting at home, after school. She'd get off work. I'd come home from school on Friday afternoon, and she had fishing rods in the back of the car, and we'd go find a place to put a line in the water. I mean, it was just, so I'm always a big supporter of women in the outdoors because I was raised by a woman to learn how to be in the outdoors. All right. So Kelli, let's finish up some thoughts. We've been waylaid by technical difficulties and storms today. Let's finish up your thoughts on, you talked about, talking about women getting involved in careers in conservation and the outdoors. And I think where we left it was you were talking about one of the first steps is go volunteer.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. Yeah. And I think, again, to really create, and give you an idea of what the job actually entails, one misconception that a lot of people have, I certainly did before I actually got involved professionally, was that you're working with wildlife the whole time. And it's definitely a job. It's a service job, right? Because our wildlife is a public resource. So as long as you love talking to people, you're passionate about management and addressing the public. I can't tell you how many times I would get pulled over, or someone would pull over to talk to me because they saw the Parks and Wildlife emblem on the truck. So they say, hey, how many rainbow trout can I catch here? And I would, not what I was doing at all, right? But they see that emblem. So you have to know that you're going to work probably more with people than you are with wildlife. But that's how things get done, right? The sheep can't knock on the front door and say, hey, I'm running out of water. It's our job to really communicate for the species. So I thought for sure I was just going to be living in bear dens, but unfortunately, a lot of it is public interface and working with the public, and talking to hunters and talking to hikers, talking to your commission, your board, and so a lot of it is just make sure you like people if you work in wildlife.
Exactly. So you're also a wildlife photographer. How does that influence the way you see the outdoors and tell the outdoor story?
Yeah. I just love being in the field. And so I always sort of joke that, if I'm not shooting with a gun, I'm shooting with a camera. I think there's a huge misconception in the non-hunting world, that we hate animals, that we want to kill animals. That's, what we're out there to do. And the reality is we are obsessed with animals. We, want to learn more about them. I think that's why when we start hunting a new species, we spend as much time as we can, right? We pattern deer. We look at where they're wintering. We look at where they're summering, when they're rearing young. So if it's not a hunting season, or even if it is, right? So hopefully one day I draw a bighorn sheep tag, probably not, but I will be out with my camera every rut season just to watch the rut, watch the sheep, take, some fun images. And there are times I will just set my camera down too, if I'm watching some cool wildlife interactions where, it's a mountain goat walking, down the mountain, or it's bighorn sheep during the rut, or mule deer during the rut. So for me, part of the story is I just love being in the field. I love learning more about animals and animal behavior. And, sometimes it's a camera and sometimes I'm hunting. So whatever tool I want or need to be in the field is a win for me.
Yeah. Come clean, Kelli. You're out there scouting, aren't you? Because it's
For
not if it's
bighorn
when.
sheep.
Yeah, it's not if, it's when you're going to get that tag.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
You got to think positive, because when you get drawn, you're like, oh, I know exactly where I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Are you looking for an investment that goes beyond the ordinary? Wildlife Partners is the nation's leader in breeding and consulting for the exotic wildlife industry. When you invest in wildlife, you're not just acquiring a 100% tax-deductible asset, you're playing a vital role in the conservation of endangered species. Do you own land? You can turn your ranch into a profitable wildlife-driven business. And even if you don't own land, that's no problem. Wildlife Partners offers unique opportunities for non-landowners to invest in conservation while enjoying significant tax benefits and potential cash flow. So in your bio, you've got a mention of IGP Schutzhund. I have no clue what that is, and I'm guessing 99% of the people watching or listening to this podcast don't. Walk us through that. What is that all about?
Yeah, so this has been a really fun newish hobby, I would say. I have a Belgian Shepherd or Belgian Malinois. I'm obviously not, in the academy. I'm not a police officer or in the military, which is usually where they're used. However, there's a big community of people. We call it kind of the sport dog world. So for people who hunt, with retrievers and labs, it's very similar type dedication and training for these shepherds. I'm part of a dog club, so we have a membership to DVG, which is Schutzhund came from Germany. It used to be sort of the breed standard for German shepherds. If your dog could not perform these sort of tasks, you weren't given permission from the government to breed the dog. So it's really about preserving the dog itself, preserving all these things they were bred for. We trial and protection in scent work or tracking, and then also advanced obedience. So it's a new sort of um, hobby that I'm getting into. I do a lot of sport dog photography now, sort of bringing in that hobby as well. And my dog, he loves it. We've only got one title. It's incredibly challenging. It's probably the sport that the sport I've done with the most self reflection, because these are very smart dogs. They're capable of a lot. When the dog's not doing what you want it to do, you have to look at yourself and say, where am I failing in communicating this to my dog? Because I know he's capable. We like to say, like, the handler is usually the problem. So
Yeah. So where's the dog? Why isn't
uh,
he or she on the
he
podcast?
he is right here. Ovis, come here. His name is Ovis because I love
Of
sheep.
course.
Here. Yep. Here, buddy. Right here. Right here. Come here.
Uh,
Here he is. So he's got a nice little bed in here and just sort of
oh,
hangs out
what a
with me.
gorgeous animal.
Yeah, he's a ton of fun. Ton of
Oh,
fun.
wow. Wow. He's not spoiled at all, I can tell. I know he's a working dog, but I see that. He's a little spoiled.
Yeah, just a little bit. He works hard though. He deserves it.
What a great dog. What a great dog. Hey, well, I'm going to tell you what, it's an attribute to their discipline and to your training that he's been there for almost an hour and we didn't even know he was there.
Exactly.
That's crazy. What's crazy? So what would you say? Is there like a memorable experience from your own personal international travel from a cultural standpoint that really stands out to you? Is it a new food you're introduced, a new tradition, a new culture? Is there? I know you've experienced a lot of them, but is there one that's kind of like I didn't expect that?
Oh my gosh. There's so many, I'm sure. I think I'll go back to Tajikistan because I spent quite a bit of time there, and it's probably the place that I've traveled to where the culture difference was so vast. It's just a very different, place in the world and different way of living. But I'm trying to think of maybe the thing that made me sort of step back. I did ride a yak. That's a thing.
Ah, nice.
So they do ride yaks in some places in Tajikistan, which was surprisingly comfortable. It really was like sitting on a big, hairy potato, kind of,
Mm.
So that was pretty fun and eye opening. And then as hunters too, I think people are using more than what maybe we have historically in the past, but the amount of the animal that they use in other countries, Africa as well, versus what we use, it varies quite a bit. They obviously don't have as much for their resources, so they're using things like intestine, they're using organs, they're using, they use yak poop, the discs to heat their fire. So
Yeah.
they're very, very resourceful in other places where they don't have other options, and they're perfectly adequate options, right? That's not that's helping, right? We're just using carbon to heat the fire. You can pick them up. The yaks are going to keep pooping, so we're going to use it. And so it was really cool to see and try, because I always try to try every food, even if your mind's like, ooh, I don't know about that. But the organ meats and the different parts of the animal, we were talking about ribs earlier, generally something people don't eat of their deer or their elk. But we put the ribs as one of their favorite parts of the ibex in Tajikistan. And so we made that, and it was really, really good. So I think being exposed to using, other parts of the animal that we generally don't was really quite interesting. They'll use it was dried intestine, and they'll make sculptures out of it, and then they have like a centerpiece for their meal, which was interesting and kind of cool.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think kind of along those lines, I did get to participate quite a bit in some of the villages in Tajikistan. When clients weren't there, I participated in making bread. They would take 2 or 3 oxen, tie them together, and then they would put all the seed on the ground, and you would run behind the bowls with a stick and a bucket, and you pat the outside of them, and they keep them moving in a circle, and you have to catch their poop so it doesn't get in the seeds as they separate the hull from the seed to make the bread. And it's a big event. I went to some Tajik weddings. Gosh, you asked me that question, and now my mind is spiraling because there's so many cool things that you get to see when you spend quite a bit of time in places like that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just having this vision of you running behind a big giant yak with a poop bucket.
I'll send you some photos. They're pretty funny.
That's hilarious.
It's
Yeah,
hard work.
I can imagine, and probably not the most glamorous work either.
No.
I remember when I was in Namibia last week. I walked in the cleaning shed and I'd shot a mature female kudu that they just wanted culled, and I walked in there and they had the stomach laid out. I'm like, what? Okay, I know that's the stomach because of the size of it, and that's what we had for a stew that night as far as an appetizer, and it was not bad actually. But you're
Yeah.
right, they don't
Yeah.
waste anything.
And I think that's great. I think we could, I think there's more interest in that now. People are, bringing out cull fat and other parts of animals that maybe we've dismissed before. And if it's a possibility to, be in the backcountry and pack it out, and you've got, the space and people to
It,
do it, I think it's pretty cool.
I think it's coming. I always laugh. My wife and I always laugh when you see a conversation or article about people using tallow.
Hmm.
Tallow, people have been using tallow, and it's like, oh, we're going back to, my grandmother kept a tin can full of bacon grease on the back of the stove every day of the week, and she cooked
Yep.
with it. I mean, tallow is not a new thing. We call it fat. We call it bacon fat, but I mean, beef tallow and that sort of thing. We've been using that forever in the South. I know. And I know most people who have got any connection to the outdoors has as well. It's hilarious. Some of the things that people are quote unquote discovering um,
Right.
these days.
The Houston Safari Club Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports the future of hunting and conservation. Wildlife and habitat conservation, youth education and outdoor experiences, scholarships, and anti-poaching efforts are just a few of the programs supported by this organization. Monthly events, an annual convention, award-winning publications, networking opportunities, and valuable resources for hunting knowledge are just a few of the benefits of being a member of Houston Safari Club Foundation. If you're searching for a group of people dedicated to protecting the future of hunting, look no further. Join Houston Safari Club Foundation today at wehuntwegive.org or call 713-623-8844.
What keeps you passionate about your work? I mean, I know obviously you have a lot of passion about the conservation and the teaching and that sort of thing, but your day to day with keeping people safe. I mean, what drives you?
I think I'm so passionate about it, and I love it so much because I see myself there. I could talk about hunting for the rest of my life every day. It's what I enjoy. It's what I enjoy to do. It's so fun to talk to fellow hunters and get excited about a trip. And so it's not unrelatable for me to say, they say, hey, like you said, I'm going to Namibia, or I'm going to Zambia, I'm going to Zimbabwe. We talk about the hunt. And we talk about, the travel that's involved, the security, the medical, things that are the things we need to know, right, to be remote and also to be safe. So I think I stay passionate about it because I am that person. No matter who I'm talking to, I'm almost I get to refresh myself, on the daily of what I need to be prepared for, and what I need to be thinking about. We're all that people. We all travel. We all are passionate about hunting, and like I had said before, hunters don't have quite that self-preservation that a lot of other people have. So, people say, yeah, I'm going on this hunt. It's in Iraq, but I'm going on this hunt, or it's in, X, Y, or Z country that is maybe not the safest. And so what do I need to be prepared for? We're used to being in the element. We're used to being challenged. And it just doesn't fear a lot of us. We just prepare ourselves. So it's easy for me to get excited about it because, I feel like in a way I'm sort of self-reflecting. I'm talking to myself, this is the same stuff I like to do. And obviously I care about people's safety. You create so many relationships in this industry. So it's also, these people become lifelong friends. You see them at the hunting shows and all across the industry.
Yeah, well, it definitely comes through that you're passionate about it, and you have a great deal of care about it, and a great deal of yourself invested in it. So I can truly appreciate that. The website is globalrescue.com. That's globalrescue.com. You can also go to the wehuntwegive.org website and click on the Global Rescue drop down. That allows you to still get all the great global rescue services, but also Global Rescue gives back to conservation through the Houston Safari Club Foundation. Kelli Poole, the hunting account manager with Global Rescue. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've learned a lot, and we got to have you back on to talk about some of these, more of these poop bucket stories.
So for some reason, I have a lot of them.
Yeah, I bet you do. Like I said, keep it in the back of your mind. Start taking notes because you're going to want to write a book one day. And I think people would enjoy reading it.
Yeah, probably.
Absolutely. Kelli, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great time.
Hunting Matters is a Houston Safari Club Foundation production. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For questions or more information, email us at info@wehuntwegive.org.